All right, back with the game plan series, and this one I want to listen as much as anything because you're the food plot pro. But I mean, I plant them every year. I got my own little place, and I'm always monkeying with different blends you all send me and whatever, and trying to figure it out. I mess it up more often than not, but I have learned a ton over the years. And so today I want to kind of talk about some of the Mossy Oak University tips that you did, talking about where do you put your food plots and why.
Hey guys, Austin here at Mossy Oak Gamekeepers. Today we're going to be talking about different types of food plots and how you can use them on any particular piece of property. So when you hear the word food plot, a lot of people just envision a fall or a winter cool season food plot that we're using for hunting purposes. So there's so many other different ways to use a food plot, such as spring and summertime food for nutrition. So the things we're looking at to use there are obviously clovers that we're going to be managing during the spring and the summer for not only very good attraction, but also great nutrition for fawns as they're being born, great milk for the mothers, bucks are growing antlers. Clover is a big cornerstone of most any food plot. We're also looking at warm season legumes that time of year, forage soybeans, peas, grain sorghums. All these are great food sources for your whitetail during the summertime. Not only are we looking at food plots to use during the hunting season just from an attraction and hunting standpoint, but also those warm season food plots that we use for the nutrition to make sure our bucks are getting everything they need for antler growth, our does are getting everything they need to produce and raise as healthy as fawns as possible. So there's a lot of different ways to utilize food plots within a piece of property. We can look at early season food plots, late season food plots, things we like to refer to as sanctuary or destination food plots that we don't particularly hunt them, but we do plant them so that we've always got an area that deer can go, find a really good source of food, feel safe there, and unpressured. Early season food plots, we love to use stuff like radishes, oats, these things that deer love during the earliest part of the season. And we can install those on a piece of property where they make the most sense from an access standpoint. Then you can also look on the opposite end of the spectrum and think about late season food plots. If you've got some areas that are very secluded, they're hard to get to maybe, but they can be really good areas during the later part of the season, then we can plant blends in those plots that are going to be specifically attractive during that late season. And you've left them alone that are unpressured. That can really be a great way to fill a tag in the later part of the season. So some pieces of property may have tons of opportunities to put in food plots, areas that are already cleared out. When you go in to plant these food plots, put them in there with a purpose. Put this particular food plot in with the purpose of it being a destination food plot. Put this one in the back corner because it's going to be great during the late season. Go in with a purpose ahead of time so that you can have the most successful season possible.
I mean, one of the first questions you probably get is where to put my food plots, you know? So how do you answer?
I really tell guys, you know, what's at your disposal. Do you have 40 acres or is it 400? Do you have a lot of options, or are you just narrowing it down to hey, I've only got 2 spots I can put one? Because that's really going to play into, you know, how many choices do you have. One of the biggest things you got to look at is access and equipment. Can you get in there and can you disc, can you mow, can you do all the things that you need to do to really, you know, be successful at planting a food plot, or is it a spot where it's going to be hand tools only? So that's one of the first things you want to look at. It's just no different than looking at, you know, going to a stand, access. Can we get in there with equipment? Sunlight's obviously a big deal. You know, we want to look at, you know, it's completely closed canopy, because invariably a lot of people want to put food plots in places where it gets 0 sunlight, and they're like, can I grow a food plot here? And I'm like, well, not real well.
Yeah.
You know, getting something green is one thing, but get something that's effective is something totally different. So, you know, access in and out, not only with equipment, but when we're hunting.
Yeah.
Is this a spot that's worth putting one in, or am I walking past 3 different types of bedding to get to it? Because that's totally defeating the purpose. And it's probably not going to be real effective when it comes to hunting, when you sit there and you've walked past right where they like to bed just because you've got a nice pretty food plot. So there's a lot of things that go into why and where you're going to put a food plot, but the biggest things I'm going to look at is access, and does it make sense when it comes to hunting, or is this just a feeding food plot? Is this just a summertime field that we're going to plant just for nutrition and attraction?
Right. And that's a good point, talking about, you know, why of a food plot. Because what I learned from you and you guys is food source availability throughout the year. You know, getting them something to where there's a buffet table set for them all year round.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand that prior to, you know, up with you guys, that, you know, to keep them on your dirt, to keep the carrying capacity of your dirt at the highest it can be, you need steady food source throughout the year. So one of the other tips you guys put together breaks that down between warm and cold season food plots. So let's watch the warm season one first.
Hey guys, Austin Delano here at Mossy Oak Gamekeepers, and today we're talking about warm season food plots, why we should use them, and how they can be utilized on a piece of property to help it be better for whitetail hunting. So when we start talking about warm season food plots, there's tons of info out there and there's tons of different things you can plant. One of the main reasons we plant warm season annuals during the spring and the summer is to increase the interaction, increase the nutrition on a piece of property for whitetails. We all know that coming out of the winter time, bucks are starting to grow a new set of antlers. We've got does that are pregnant with fawns. They're going to be starting to produce milk. They're going to be nursing these fawns. They need the best nutrition possible. So on a lot of pieces of property, sometimes your food plots are going to be your highest areas of nutrition, and we want to make them as good as possible. So a lot of times we're using stuff like forage soybeans, we're using peas, grain sorghums, sunflowers. Clover is a huge part of our spring and summer food plot programs. These are all varieties that are going to provide a lot of attraction and nutrition on a piece of property so that you're giving the deer as high protein food sources as possible for producing better antlers and just better overall deer herd health. So when we're using a warm season planting on a piece of property in a food plot, let's just take, for instance, it's a forage soybean plot. Okay, let's say that our deer density is in good shape and the soybean plot makes a pretty good crop of actual beans. They've stayed in there all spring and summer, browsing on the forage, but it's also made a pretty good crop of beans. We know those are going to be very attractive in the later part of the season. One tactic we like to use to make sure we get as much good out of that plot as possible is to just go and overseed those standing beans with a cool season blend, so that we've not only got standing beans on the stalk for the later part of the winter, but we've also got some green forage growing there for the earlier part of the season. That's one way you can kind of dual purpose the food plot that you've got in a warm season annual, because a lot of times you've made enough beans, you don't want to go in there and just totally take that crop out and clean the plate, so to speak. So double cropping that area by overseeding it just before the leaves drop off the soybeans in the late summer and early fall is a great way to have beans on the stalk, but you've also got green forage growing underneath it. This is just one of the many ways you can use a warm season food plot on your property. Again, we're shooting for maximum nutrition while the deer are growing and providing the best nutrition for our whitetails as possible during the most critical growing season.
Define, what's a warm season food plot?
Yeah, so for most people, a warm season food plot is going to be something we're going to be planting in the spring or the early part of the summer, primarily for a nutrition aspect. Right. We're trying to get as much protein in these deer while the bucks are carrying, you know, they're starting to grow antlers. Your does are, you know, they're developing fawns inside their bodies, and they need as much nutrition as possible, and we're trying to pump that protein into them. So whether it be, you know, a nice big new forage soybean field, or, you know, some protein peas, whatever you choose to plant for the spring and the summer, that's what we're concentrating on. And we're not thinking about hunting so much as we are,
right,
hey, here's a field they're going to come to, you know, we got to make it big enough that it's going to, you know, stand up to the browse pressure, and it's going to keep them fed up until we're ready to plant a cool season food plot.
I think that's why it doesn't get the same attention, because people want to plant a food plot they're going to hunt over,
right,
you know, and that's going to be in the fall. So it doesn't get the same amount of attention. But what you're talking about with regards to giving them nutrition throughout the year, that's a huge lesson for me, because not only does it make them bigger, healthier, but it keeps them on your dirt.
Yeah, it's,
you know,
it's kind of imprinting.
Yeah, like they habitually hit the same spot.
It's generational. If you can get some older mature does and they're raising their fawns that they have that year into, hey, here's a spot we always come at this time of year to get a steady food source.
Yeah, so cold season, everybody feels more comfortable with that. Let's watch that tip you did about cold season.
Hey guys, Austin here with Mossy Oak Gamekeepers. Today we're going to talk a little bit about cool season food plots. Now that term can be a little bit of a misconception, because we're actually planting cool season food plots in the very end of the summer and the very early part of the fall. But we're putting these varieties in for obviously hunting season, the fall and the winter. So the varieties we like to use in a lot of our cool season food plots are going to be all different varieties of cereal grains, oats, wheat, triticale. We're also use a lot of brassicas, a lot of stuff in the hybrid rape family, really cold season, really cold tolerant turnips. And then we also obviously are huge fans of clover for the cool season. Clover is such a cool crop because you get a lot of growth out of it through so much of the year in a lot of different climates, so it makes a killer cool season food plot. When you're getting ready to plant some cool season food plots for the hunting season, one of the things you really want to pay attention to is where you live at in relation to what you're planning on planting. Take for instance our brassica varieties. So one of our #1 blends we use is Maximum, which is all brassica varieties. Ideally, these need at least 60 days of growth before your first average frost, so that you get as much forage as possible up and out of the ground before the cool weather sets in. This cool weather doesn't kill the plant, but it definitely slows the growing process down. On the other end of the spectrum, we don't want to plant them so early in the spring or even into the summer, because they'll get too much growth on them and they're not as attractive and not as palatable to your deer if they get planted too early. So that's one of the #1 things we want to look at when we're getting ready to plant a cool season food plot is where do you live at and what does the blend contain that you're looking at planting. So one of the #1 questions we get asked throughout the year is, what should I plant in my food plot? And my answer to that is usually, well, that's a loaded question, man, tons of variables. But within that, you know, there's always guys that are looking for something to plant for early season, something guys are looking to plant for the late season, because there's usually a key time of year that you're looking to hunt a particular piece of property or hunt an area on any given piece of property. So early season, 2 of my favorites, gonna be Outfitters Blend and Deer Radish. Those are usually a slam dunk anywhere from Florida all the way to Canada. We've had success with them. The earliest part of the bow season, if it's up and out of the ground, there's probably gonna be whitetails using it. We start talking about late season food plot blends, stuff that maybe the deer are not gonna be real interested in until that November, even maybe into December time period. Doesn't mean you can't kill a deer in it in the early part of the season, but the deer, as their metabolism shifts a little bit, the cold weather sets in, they start seeking out these higher carbohydrate, higher energy food sources. So we love to use the heavy brassica blends for that time of year. Maximum and Final Forage are 2 of our favorites. Those are just slam dunks for that November, December, even going into the January part of the year, where they're really needing higher energy food sources. So when you're looking at planting a cool season food plot, think about, am I gonna hunt this area early? Am I gonna hunt it late? Is it a big enough field where I can split it in half and plant some stuff on each side? Those are just a few of the things you can look at when looking to plant a cool season food plot.
Everybody feels more comfortable with this because it's what you plant. It's, you know, you see all the pictures of giant whitetails gnawing on something. Mm-hmm. That's a cold season plot. What can you teach me about cold season plots?
Well, I think probably the biggest, reason for failure with a lot of people, what they've had with cool season food plots is the timing.
Yeah.
It's not getting them in at the right time of year, because we hear the word cool season or cold season food plots and you're thinking there's something you put in, in November, but that's obviously too late. So timing is everything, and looking at where you live in relationship to what you're planning on planting is a huge part of how successful you're going to be with that. So let's just take, for instance, right here where we're at. We're in northern Mississippi. So we've got a lot bigger window of planting time here than we did if we did in the upper peninsula, of Michigan.
Right.
So timing is everything. So if we're going to plant our cereal grains, if we're going to plant our brassicas, whatever blend we choose to plant, we're going to be putting that in. You want a solid 45 or 60 days of good frost-free growth. And that just boils down to, we want these plants to get up, get out of the ground, not have any stress, and get some really good growth on them before the cool weather sets in and kind of slows that whole growing process down. Because, we're getting to the time of year right now. Days are getting shorter,
yeah.
Photo period's shrinking. There's a lot less, the soil temperature's going down. So there's a lot of things going against the plant instead of going for it. So having those plants in the ground and having them, up and going before this cool season sets in, that's where it's at. It's the timing.
Yeah.
And getting it in so that you've got plenty of growth. Because if you get it in a week before a frost sets in, you're talking about not having hardly anything.
The how and when and why of your food plots. Seasonally, warm, cool season, where you put them, why you put them there. All of those things really you know, it's another dimension to hunting. It's another dimension to what you do, but it's all part of the same game plan.
Yeah.
You know, you combine that with all the other tactics and techniques that you're learning to try to optimize the hunt. That's a fundamental feature of a good game plan.
Yeah, and I think it goes along with everything else we do is having a reason. Don't just go plant a food plot just because there's an opening in the woods. Why? Have a reason, have a plan of why you're going to put that food plot in there, and then develop a plan of what you're going to put in there and say, hey, we're going to plant this field specifically for early season bow hunting. We're not worried about January, we're not worried about February, we're talking about October 15th until November 15th. We've got a month to hunt it. It's going to get over-browsed, but this is what this is. So that's your plan.
Yeah.
And attack it. Have a reason for it. On the opposite end, you can have a few fields that you set aside just for the late season. Maybe you've got a bean field which you're leaving standing beans in it. You can disc up 2 acres right beside it, put in winter bulbs right beside it. You've got a killer combo of grains on the stalk and winter bulbs, the forage itself, and then the actual bulb. And if you've got some late season bucks hanging around, 9 out of 10 does is going to be standing in that, come January.
It's food. And I mean, I heard some smart deer hunters tell me one time, you're hunting a deer based on his appetite or his libido, one of the two things. And so, making a game plan around appetite is just as important.
Well, it's such a big piece of the pie than his libido, because that's a really small window, and then it's gone.
Yeah,
but that appetite is almost always there.